Michelle.
Daniel.
Yuri.
Yuri! Yuri's in our house! Yuri's in our house. So Yuri is with us. We're sitting in we've got him on the couch.
Plushies, huge plushies.
Yeah, the kids have been attacking Yuri the entire time. It's been hilarious. So thank you for letting the kids attack you, Yuri.
This was my pleasure.
Oh, he's such a gentleman.
Yeah.
Like Haven, like Reed doing backflips, or like Reed just riding around on Yuri's neck. That's really fun.
Let me get on your shoulders. We ride it on.
Yeah. 20 minutes later, he's still on my shoulders.
Yeah, I will never leave.
No, it's
I'm
like
committed to this.
he's like asleep. He's like taking a nap up there, and Yuri's
I
like,
live up here now.
Yuri's like, can I put him down? And he's like, no, you cannot. No, you actually cannot. So Yuri's here, and we were in the kitchen talking about theories of reading in colleges and different things.
Yeah.
And it is an interesting topic because, like, on this idea of, like, classically, it's like getting to the true Hegel or something, right? Like, one of the things that's just very interesting is when you think that way, you're always paranoid in your reading, right? Like, you're not actually going into the text because you're like, what if I'm missing something? It creates this kind of really paranoid reading experience. And there's also this kind of idea that if you don't get the true reading, you know, what if you're led astray, like you were saying a minute ago?
Yeah, what if you go on YouTube and you watch the first Hegel video and you're like, this must be the Hegel interpretation that's correct.
Yeah.
If it's Cadell's interpretation.
Well, yeah.
Then you're set. Then you're set.
If you're lucky, you might get Cadell last, and it'll be like.
Then you'll be set.
Yeah, the right interpretation.
Then you'll be completely set on it. And it's just interesting because, like, what we were saying is that theory of reading is probably tied to a lack of information technology that allows an easy access to many voices on a thinker, right? So, like, you want to make sure that whoever reads Hegel has the right interpretation because you want to make sure wherever they go, people are, when they access you, they access the right information, right? Yeah. So but now it's possible to just very easily listen to Cadell, listen to Dohler, listen to Zizek, listen to Holgate, listen to all of these people, where in the past you'd have to travel to all of these different universities and remember what they said. I mean, that's the other thing. You'd have to remember what everyone said, right? And so now it seems like it's really important to realize that we really need to realize we're free from that. You're really free from that way of reading texts, where like texts are more fields by which you follow an unfolding of thought, as opposed to trying to find true thought. There seems to be a difference between following thought to where thought leads, or to see what kind of voices and ideas emerge from a space, as opposed to making sure you have like the truth of a thinker.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I think it's powerful for me to think about it this way, because I used to just think, okay, so there was the old model. This is the teacher. The expert. They teach on this, and that's like really, I could really empathize or sympathize, whichever the word is, with that idea. Of
I get confused on that too. Like, is it empathy or sympathy? It's like, just depends on which one you reach first.
Yeah, whichever comes out of my mouth first. But I think that it's like, I guess that's. I mean, I would kind of be like, I guess that's in a way kind of true. Maybe people are just gonna be like on YouTube, just becoming stupid because of it. But really, the thing is that when you talk about this, Daniel, where it's like, oh, this medium technology affords this like cross-checking, cross-pollination. You can actually listen to them a lot more, and then you can kind of also start to like, yes, in a way it does require some cultivation in your subjectivity, I think, for discernment, but you really should be developing that anyway, right? Like, that's really what institutions and education should at least be about to a degree, right? So the fact that this concern about the expert and the expertise in that role of being like, we will pass down the information to you, and this is the source, and if you don't go to the source, you might be getting the wrong information. That's been the idea. Mm-hmm. Well, online, it's like, well, yeah, it's true. There could be like a really crappy source, a really good source, and an amazing source, and maybe it's just this requires a greater drive to actually care enough to listen to 7 videos, because some people might hear them like, well, I'm not going to do that. Like, they just want to get it, like, just somebody feed me this thing, like, I just want to know what it is. So I do think it does cultivate something in the subjectivity, or require something, but that is also can be very, very fruitful, and in a way I think that can, even just that drive itself can guard against the sort of like possibly like getting the wrong information, because you are gonna like just inherently, almost intrinsically, go ahead and do wider research, and then sort of realize, what is the Venn diagram here? There seems to be these overlapping things or themes about Hegel's work, right? And then you also think it's not just about what Hegel said, but it's about what Hegel means for us in our daily lives, right? So whoever's explicating that like best, I think, is who you're going to gravitate toward, So anyways, just a thought that came to mind, because a lot of people have this concern, I'm not trying to say there's no role for the expert. It's just that now it's not that you actually get rid of the expert. You have multiplicity of expert, and some are more and less, and then you have this ability to kind of glean off of all of that. But when people are not thinking about it in terms of how this literally changes the whole form of how we maybe educate ourselves about a particular philosopher, then it's difficult not to slip back into that fear of well, what are we saying? Are we just negating the expert? But it's like, no, it's a sublation of that in a way, I think.
So, as a person who grew up using the internet, and I remember I was downloading books on my Kindle, which I would sneak into my class in high school, and I would read instead of listening to the lecture.
Yeah.
So it's completely intuitive to me to use the internet for my personal purposes, for, as you say, like in your daily life. For me, it's just like whatever is the problem I'm solving in my life, I'll find books for it, or I'll find YouTube videos about it, or whatever I'm interested in, I'll find stuff about it. So it's really like a treasure trove for personal motivation. But then expertise sort of doesn't mean something in a set framed way, but only means something insofar as it's in relation to me and what I need in my moment, right? And it's just like completely irrelevant what the institution says, because I literally have at my fingertips the solution to any possible curiosity, interest, problem I have, and I can find it at any point. And so it's just like the greatest gift. And what you guys say is, then the discernment comes in about what is it actually which I'm going to consume out of this infinite sea of material. There comes a sort of a taste or a discernment of like, okay, I cannot watch all of it. I don't have time to watch all the lectures on Hegel. I don't have time to figure out what's the best from all the possible solutions to my problem, what's the best one. But this is where this sort of soft skill of taste and personal preference comes in. And it's like really such a great way to navigate life, because you don't even have to think. Like the entire point is like have a personal taste into what you want, right?
Oh yes.
You don't even need to argue to anyone, oh, why do you like something? You can just learn whatever you want. There's no need for explication, justification, or anything. And this was my intuition my entire life, so it's kind of like it's what people on the internet will grow up with.
Well, what's funny, that was excellent, and basically that intuition, Bergson puts emphasis on intuition. There's a notion that the intuition is the formulating principle. Like that is the call of the form. Like I think the best interpretations of Plato's form that are not disembodied dualist is the notion of you're sensing out the formulation. You sense out the formulation. And that's an intuitive act that is tied to drive. Because what's also very important about what you're describing with the internet and why it's really important is you're actually perpetually exercising judgment. There's a certain judgment tied to an intuition that seems merely relative, but it's not random. There's a logic to it. It's a hard to explain high-order logic, but there's a reason you do these things that are very customized to you, but it's not random. Well, that's the logic of a form. That's the logic of a high-order causality. That's a Bergson, intuition. It's very interesting, even if we get into Heidegger, there's a way in which the later Heidegger, the logic of being is a certain odd ontological call. There's a certain call, something calls to you, and you follow it, right? In these thinkers, learning is the pursuit of that call, right? And the internet allows a certain return to a learning style that is actually formulating according to that call. The problem is that education, and the point also is that theories of interpretation are tied to the economic material conditions of the day. And so if you had an industrial-based economy, and you needed a certification to determine who should have what jobs in that economy, well then education is going to be formulated as such to make you good citizens or good employees or good people like that, right? And a big theory of a good educated person was being well-rounded, right? Like you took a little philosophy, you took a little English, you took a little bit of everything, and then you became a master at business or computer science, right? You got your PhD, right? Well, I think this idea of the true reading of Hegel or the true reading of Heidegger or Dostoevsky or whatever is tied to the introduction problem in that theory of learning, right? Because basically what they're saying is, when they're saying, how do we know if you got the true reading of Hegel, they're like, how do we know you got the main principles? Because otherwise you didn't do the introductory class correct, right? Like, what if you missed out on the main notions? And that's tied to an education model that is basically making sure you're well-rounded, that you got your 101 philosophy class, and then you can move on, right? But then that's an education that's not based on following a call, like you were describing, Jurij, but actually preparation for employment.
Yeah, and I think that's all really interesting and good, and I appreciate the concrete, like what you shared about the concrete experience with the internet as you grew up.
Yeah, that's very good.
That's fascinating. Like, I didn't have that, like I didn't have that growing up. So for me, it's still all these questions, about the expert, right? But I think it's fascinating because it shows that, it's not like you're sitting there in class with your Kindle being like, well, I guess I can't trust what's on my, I can't trust this YouTube video because it's not the teacher in front of me, or it's not like, some particular politician. Like, you just listen, you just see what they're saying. And I think there's a lot more trial and error too. Like, because the thing is, you use the internet to look up something like, my dishwasher won't turn off, or just something silly, right? But like, you look up a YouTube video about it.
Yeah.
You see if it works. It works. Cool. Or it doesn't work. And then you're like, oh, it didn't work. Okay, I'll go search for another thing. Yeah. And I think there's like this, I don't know, it does make me wonder if there's something like where again, I do think there's something sublational here for the experts.
Sure.
But I do wonder if it's like, it does actually put it much more on the practical, like how it kind of was originally. Like, the expert originally would have been like your mentor, and you'd be the apprentice, and so it's practically like, yeah, this is literally what you do with the clay. Then you try it and you're like, I see this works.
Right.
So it's like that model.
So practically 100% internet is the place to go for whatever practical problem. The hard part is with the moral, ethical, how do I live my life type of problems, value problems, right? Yeah. Which are obviously not solved by the institutions. And are not easily solved by the internet, right? Yeah. And so my sort of usage of the internet was a continual disorienting search for role models for the institution, the authority, of what I would find legitimate. And this is not something most people will go through, but going through that process, that was like incredibly rewarding. So in a sense, it solves, like, I'm 100% sure it solves all personal practical problems, but it doesn't at all solve like the legitimacy problems, the ethical problems, the value problems, what people growing up have, or in general. Yeah. Like, it even, like, it increases them because it destroys the legitimacy of the school system, etc.
Yeah. So really quick, in light of what you just said, do you think there's still a way that there could be something redemptive within the internet to solve that problem, or do you think that it just creates a new relationship with...
So it makes ethics an economic problem of supply and demand, right? So you see that with Jordan Peterson, Andrew Tate. So examples close to my heart are the examples of men trying to find their own way.
Yeah. And
those are, people have gone really astray in many different ways you can imagine.
Sure.
You have the Red Pill movement, you have like people like Andrew Tate who are catering to a specific demographic of men in their highly virile, high potential, aggressive age, who are probably stuck at their computers, have no value system, and then they're easily captured. There's high demand, so they're easily captured by this flashy money thing, right? Then Jordan Peterson, which I think has been a great influence in the sense of like having the message of sort of like bearing responsibility and sort of creating meaning for young men, right?
Yeah.
But like the interesting thing is now it's a supply and demand problem, and
Yes.
now ethics goes by market principles, and so we now buy and sell ethics, which is a really funny situation to be in.
Yes. Yes.
That's
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it's great.
And so ethics now suffers with marketing issues and like suffers with attentionalism issues, right?
Yeah.
Because like, oh yeah, you want your ethics to be the flashiest and like good ethics, which is really hard to achieve.
Yes.
And which is like why Jordan Peterson was doing something really interesting and incredible. How do you speak to millions of people, get the attention of millions of people, and tell them to like, you know,
Go make your bed.
go make your bed? Like that's impressive.
Sure.
No, yeah.
Sure,
It's
sure.
it's a really important point. Yeah.
Well, you know, there's a few things. So, one, that was all excellent. Second, the internet absolutely accelerates the loss of givens, which makes value judgments, existential stability more and more difficult. But in so doing, can also then free you from previous banalities of evil, closed-mindedness, and things that calls, you know, totalitarian movies, Nazism, fascism, and so on and so forth. But then also in that very anxiety of the release, it then can make you long to return to it, so then it can accelerate those previous problems. You can have a return of fascism. So this...
Which is what you see on the internet all the time.
Exactly right. So you now have a certain return to the conditions of the banality of evil precisely from what freed you from it, as Hannah Arendt talks about, and as Bologna again talks about. So this problem of the anxiety of the internet and the value problem all come together. And the problem is the institutions, precisely because they are basically operating in a neurotic structure, teaching you neurotic values in the Lacanian sense, like authority-based values, are inadequate for the current system, because the values have to be much more about the encounter of otherness, the movement, the nomadic, the pluralistic, the relation, the developing, right? So what are values that are part of an unfolding, right? You need a kind of, like, what are the values of an unfolding, we could say? Like, most of history, values have been more of, like you were saying, like, the value is, what is the truth? What is the true reading of Hegel? The value is determining the true reading of Hegel, we could say, if we'll just stick with that example. Like, the value is determining what is the good, what is the true, what is the moral, and so on and so forth. Well, if instead what we're talking about is the proper hermeneutical theory for reading Hegel is actually the following of the unfolding of thought, like the unfolding of thought, then values now, like the name of the game is being able to hold to an unfolding value, like a process of a value that is realizing its own logic, which is the Hegelian science of logic, right? Like what, and the reason why that is important is because when you were talking about, Michelle, with the information technology, and you were talking about using it, like, in a way, it's actually, like, well, there's a few things. One, the problem is that universities teach philosophy, they actually teach it as if they don't believe that it actually affects your life. Like, because if it did, then you would just reiterate. You would just compare and say, well, Hegel must be right. You know, this must be, you know, Hegel must be right. And this must be the truth of Hegel, because when I do this thing that I think I'm reading in Hegel, I get X consequence, right? Yeah. Like, this whole obsession with getting the true interpretation of Hegel is kind of like not believing that life is a test.
It's like kind of like numinal in a sense,
yes.
in a Kantian way, because it's almost like, yeah, okay, we'll just really hope that, like, it's lining up with this thing we can't see.
Yes.
And so, but if you could practically do it, like, I know it's as simple as that example is about the dishwasher, but it's like, it works, it doesn't work. Which I don't mean it to sound utilitarian. It's more about the actual relationship between thought and what it actually means for, like, our lived experience, you know?
Yeah,
so,
we don't, but, like, they teach Lacan, for example. Like, you've got to learn the truth of Lacan or you'll never be able to tell. Like, when Lacan is in your life. No, if you pay attention to the letter, it's like, actually, this does define the relationship if you pay attention, right?
I saw, like, Dr. Leon Brenner, he's a German, I think he's in Germany, in Berlin or something, he teaches out in Berlin.
Yes.
He was, he said something that I thought was really interesting. He had said something about, like, don't, you know, some people read Lacan to try and, you know, really get down what the meanings are of all the things that, those terms that he uses. He's like, that's not as important as realizing that things are always fluctuating, that there's always, like, this fluctuation of meaning and interpretation. Mm-hmm. In a sense, and I probably am misrepresenting what he says perhaps, but, so don't quote me on that, sorry, Dr. Brenner. But, but the point was that I got was just this idea that and don't get me wrong, I mean, you should probably know what, like, you know, these terms mean, you know, the other and all that. But it's like, it's more the idea that if you get so fixated about just kind of being able to, like, spit out definitions, you never really feel the resonance of what that means for the actual, like, lived meaning of those words. Like, what it was Lacan after, you know, like, what when we talk about that, you know, what is he like after, and kind of being after what Lacan's after, and therefore utilizing what the tools and mechanisms he was using to get there, but not just getting stuck. It's like rock wall climbing. You're just stuck on these, like, little rocks that you're, you know, these are the definitions. It's like, you're not climbing, man. Like, great, you grip those rocks really great, but, like, you're not climbing, you know. And it does not to dismiss those words. It's just to say that, yeah, there's a constant, like, fluctuation and reinterpretation, that meaning isn't always what we, as, you know, fixed as we think it is, in the sense of it always being also related to narratives. So anyways, I just wanted to spit that out there.
Well, so I'm thinking about what is the function of universities. And one function is the industrial function of hard sciences, doing research, etc., and providing economic value. The other function which comes to mind in relation to this conversation is of providing intellectual legitimacy for the current elites.
Yep.
And the production of sort of morality, ethics, and narratives, right? And so if this production were to self-efface itself, self-contradict itself, allow for different contradictions, then it actually wouldn't fulfill its function.
Correct.
And that would be a contradiction. And so expecting a university to sort of, like, encourage free thought is absurd. Like,
yes,
I would
exactly.
never expect a university to encourage free thought.
No,
like,
absolutely not.
If you expect that, come on, like, think harder.
Yeah. No, it's like, you know, it's like, we're not afraid to follow truth wherever it leads, as long as it leads to us. You know, it's like yeah, you can follow truth wherever it leads, within fences.
So here's an interesting virtue ethic in this thing, is that thinking should always be in relation to reality, in dialectic with whatever I'm doing in the moment, right? And so thinking in a way which does not pursue truth freely, but serves the current moment or the current thing in a sense in order to deal with reality differently, is what I think is virtuous thinking.
Yes.
And so what if all these, you know, disgusting, boring definition furthering universities are actually being virtuous because they're at least trying to fulfill their function?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point, because I was thinking to myself, like, in some ways they may be seeing themselves as, like, bastions of the baton, right? Like, this is the flame that's been passed to us. Now we must pass this very flame to the next. Like, that is their purpose, right? You know, so it's like, in a way you can understand that they are like, well, look, like, if you're gonna get forest fires if you just start letting everybody talk about Hegel or whatever.
Yes.
You know, so I mean, it's true, and maybe that the best way to think about it is, you know, just to allow the dialectical relationship between the institutions, and then there's YouTube, you know, where there's like the other space that does it differently, but that's because they they don't have that virtue ethic for themselves, right? They don't. Like, they're not the institution.
Yes.
So they're not under the same, like obligation.
Yes, and the maturity of liminal spaces will come to be at the point where they start doing things for someone else, and when they start bearing that responsibility from their own thought, right? And now it's sort of in this, like, free, we can think whatever we want, but as those people gain more legitimacy, and as they become, you know, consultants or, like, inspiration for people who are doing action in the world and have major influence, they will start bearing responsibility, and they will not have the fantasy of being a free thinker anymore. Because being a free thinker is a childish fantasy, which you need to go through, but you cannot stay there, and you need to start bearing responsibility for thinking which has real world consequences.
No, I think that's excellent. So a few things. First, to Juri's point on they don't want free thinking, it makes sense. I think that goes with...
Nor should they want to want it.
Yeah, right. Like, it's not by chance that corresponds then with a heuristic, like a hermeneutics of the true reading of Hegel. Because also, if the reading of Hegel can change, then the legitimacy of the authority can be undermined, right? So there's going to be this real emphasis on the true reading. And basically, true reading of Hegel becomes what is the consensus, Like, what is the consensus of the Hegel scholars? And so truth and consensus goes together, for good and for bad. But you see, with the internet, it is now possible to get a sense of the consensus without the institutional structure of verification, right? But it would require people to have their own judgment, right? And here's this is kind of the working assumption. Do you think that people who genuinely want to know what Hegel thought will on their own be able to figure out the definitions? Because the point you're making, Michelle, where a lot of schools are like, well, what if they don't know what dialectics are? Do you really think that someone who genuinely wants to know what Hegel thinks will not get the basic definitions? But if they're forced to take the philosophy class for a general requirement, no, they may not get the general because they don't want to be there. So the emphasis on well, what if they don't get the main ideas?
But that's why I think I was saying, it shows the power of that drive. I was saying the drive and the
Yes.
intrinsic motivation. There's something very powerful about that, because what it shows is that it will actually, it typically, it seems like there's a probability here that it typically will make the person do that work.
Well, the question is it a fair assumption to believe that people with the drive will generally arrive at the most basic principles of Hegel, for example?
I think it's a high probability.
I think it's a high probability.
I think
Now, because basically, in my opinion, most college classes before the PhD level are basically introductory classes. They're making sure you get the basic notions of the thinkers, the basic motions of thought, and then once you become a PhD, you can have your own debates and conversations about it, right? So that's one of the reasons why it tends to be neurotic in structure, authority-based, because they want to make sure everyone has the same introductory kind of premises, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, if people don't want to learn those topics, then that would be the correlating structure of education. But if it is the case that people with drive plus information technology where they can do the research on their own is on average going to arrive at an introductory knowledge of the thinker, well, then you don't need to base the college on that. Instead, because I think colleges can have a role, is precisely instead of colleges existing to deal with what we call the introduction problem, the problem of making sure everyone is introduced and shares similar introduction as similar common basis, they can help facilitate the discussion in the unfolding of thought, right? Which then, I think there's another question on this idea of, in colleges, there was this notion that was of passing the flame, right? Passing the torch in colleges being truth. So the question is the following. What is the flame that colleges pass? Do colleges pass the basic premises of thinkers, or do they pass a certain zeitgeist of intellectual unfolding? What is the heart of college, right?
Flame also can be thought of as that drive, right? Like the fire.
That's what I'm saying. The culture of the drive and intellectual unfolding and development, right? Classically speaking, classically speaking, the role of universities has always been insanely correlated with the information technology. Before the printing press, universities had a lot to do with frickin' repeating books to save the scrolls. Oration, memorizing texts, literally copying the text. Monasteries, they were about that because you didn't have the printing press, and if the scholars didn't do it, you'd lose the books, right? So there was a lot of that. Well, after the printing press, then as it moved into industrial, after the printing press, it was still mostly theology. But as you start moving into the industrial, well, it's all going to also be tied into making the employee, right? So, but if you look at the majority of history, in my opinion, and I think even most colleges would say that their main role is actually the essence of college is supposed to be creating a certain environment of intellectual unfolding and engagement, of following truth. That's the essence. But of course, to your point, Yuri, that in a way, though, means that colleges exist to do something that is fundamentally risky to their own existence, because they're about encouraging an intellectual development of which could always turn around and question the environment that is facilitating that intellectual development. So college has always been a risky paradox. Learning always has been a kind of risky paradox. And colleges and professors and institutions were those skilled at managing to hold the paradox, to keep it from going too far.
And that's also why it's funded by the state and private people rather than the market.
Yes.
I do wonder, because I accept what you're saying, Daniel, on what is the flame, right? But if the flame is just literally concepts, right? It's no. The flame is just the truth about Hegel. That's what we keep passing down. We're not even passing down a fire for it, a passion for it. We're passing down literal information because we don't want it to be tainted by like some, some.
I think a lot of people think that way. We're passing down the text so it's not
Right.
burned in the Library of Alexander kind of thing.
Right, but the thing is, it's true that I wonder if this virtue ethic of the universities and institutions, we have to really look at it through different stages of technology, right? Because like you're saying, when there were no printing presses, the virtue is going to be tied to we are literally taking the script and we're writing it again so the next generation can have it, or orating it, whatever it is, so that it can continue on. Then when you have printing press, you don't have that requirement. That is not an obligation it has anymore now, because it's outsourced to technology. So now it's okay, well, what now is our virtue?
Well,
you start to get it in question, I think.
I think so. This is where the idea of tacit knowledge comes in.
Yeah, Planier.
Where some set of knowledge cannot be written down. Right? So now we've overcome we can print it, write it down, and we're cool thing, and we don't have to worry about that. We don't have to have a bunch of priests writing. Okay, no need to allocate more resources there.
Monks.
Yeah.
It'd be rough if you were lost on an island and you've been raising your kids generation to copy it, and someone finds you in 2030. It's
We got this machine. yeah. And but now the real interesting sort of transmission of knowledge is the tacit knowledge, the soft skills, which we don't know how to write down, which we're not fully skilled in how to educate. And not only is it soft skill, it's also very often domain specific knowledge. A certain company will have a certain lineage of how to produce X type of chip, for example, and nobody in the world will just know it because it's not public knowledge. There's a lot of particulars that go into figuring it out. And so I think a lot of interesting transmission of knowledge will have to happen bespoke to a business or any sort of organization or craft which contains that knowledge, and colleges may be containers of some of it, but not all of that tacit knowledge.
Yeah.
That's a good point, because I guess my question was going to be for you, Jurij, what do you think the future, I mean, it's a big question, who knows, but what do you think the future of institutions is? Can they keep up that whatever it is, that's
right.
sort of can they keep it up as a virtue ethic that they do this, and is it enough of, I mean, the thing is, if it's truly a virtue, I would assume it would stand the test of time, that it would I guess virtues can, there's core things about virtues that are just in their nature virtuous, and they will always be virtuous, right? So yeah, maybe it's just the fact that there's a lot of people coming in saying hey, that's wonderful that you've got the truth and you want to pass it down to the next generation, and we're not against that. We're just saying we can do it in a different way, or we can do it through this multi-spectrum media or whatever. We can do it by having this conglomerate of all these thinkers, and then you can kind of just start to discern what that truth is, maybe in an even greater way, because it's blah 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 blah. What I mean to say is what's it look like for colleges is maybe it's just what you said, right, where they still do it to a degree, and then a lot of it happens outside of it. Because I don't know. Today I think people are also speaking about markets and cost and things like this. I was Helen Rollins was talking at Philosophy Portal, and she was saying how she was talking about England and how and I think there was a guy there too from, was it Switzerland or maybe Sweden?
Yeah.
I don't remember now. But the point of the matter is they're saying that the rates are going down. They're going down for people wanting to go to college because they just can't justify the cost. They can't justify the cost. So yeah, anyway, what are your thoughts there?
My thoughts are, I think what institutions provide is persistence over time. Sort of from one article I read, hardness of, so whether it's a financial institution or an educational institution or a legal institution, it fixes certain aspects of reality in order for society to function well, right? So the legal system will fix certain behaviors so we function well, the financial system will fix certain behaviors so we function well, the college system will as well teach people certain things. similarly, equally across periods of time in order for things to function well. Now the internet brings a completely new thing where it just like obliterates half of it, right? But what we still see on the internet and what is not going away is the creation of legacies, is the creation of tacit knowledge, and it still operates. It operates under like an extreme Pareto principle, where Pareto, whatever, where it's like there are still there are people who will become extremely successful at what they're doing and will start creating lineages on the internet. And there's no reason to believe because there's no reason to believe that will go away with time. It will only become more meritocratic.
Yeah.
But so one thing which internet gives is network effects. Specifically, whoever has their own cluster place on the internet, if it does accrue network effects, it gains natural hardness persistence that will feel almost like an institution, right? And so I think no matter how disorienting it may feel, like the extreme sort of fluctuation, I think it can be taken as for the good because it's in a sense meritocratic. And I mean, we will still get entrenchment due to network effects and then corruption, right? But it's much easier to go up and down and fall from grace if you start sucking, right?
Yes.
And it's easier to go up if you're really good. And so I think we will get some type of new weird institution in the institutions, many a plurality of those for different people to provide for their needs in ways which we cannot yet understand.
Excellent.
Thank you.
No, I definitely think so. If there is something, like if we take the introduction problem, it's something we've talked about, the net or parallax, which is the idea again, that when you walk into a room with 20 people that you've never met before, there's this kind of having to go through the introduction. So you kind of come up all to speed, and basically network effects can't take off until the introduction problem is dealt with, right? Because people don't have enough common base. So colleges exist to make sure that everyone understands philosophy enough that we can get people to a certain level that then the network effect can take off, right? The internet makes possible dealing with the introduction problem in a very efficient way. Basically another key to it is I can basically, people I've never met, because I can meet them online. When I meet them, the introduction problem is taken care of. It's like you feel like you know them actually, and it's really wild, and you can get to know them on your own time. And then when those 20 people go together, you don't have to have you have a sense of where everyone is. Oh, that's the Whitehead scholar. Oh, that's you have a sense of who people are. And that actually allows an acceleration of the movement into network.
I was just going to say, it's acceleration.
Yes, it is acceleration. Yeah, it is. Because most of colleges for a very long time have basically been dealing with the introduction problem. And getting to create network effects, right? Well, if the internet actually creates a far more effective coordination mechanism for dealing with the introduction problem, then that actually could be a great blessing to universities, because then they don't have to be in the business of the introduction problem. When you come here, these are live events with people that are already up to speed, so they could actually be lived hubs of network effects.
Yeah, universities should be exploiting this, just post everything online, let people do whatever they want, and then in real life organize fully live events where people interact, do stuff, and you could just totally take advantage of having a bunch of smart people together in one place which have open time, and it's you're making them stare at one person talking while they could all be having fun and doing crazy interesting things. What are you doing?
No, to me, colleges, the innovation is that colleges in a sense become more like communal centers. Instead of being where the young people go, they're actually back to being the marketplace, or the market in Rome, or the YMCA. There's another big tension where most of the time a lot of cities feel like it's the university, and then it's the town versus the university, right?
They say in America, those are townies and those are the university people, and there's kind of a strange sort of like even a language around it, even
Yeah.
if you yourself don't hold some sort of like judgment, but there's this sort of weird thing of like, oh, those are the people who actually are here for university.
Yeah,
those are the people who are the, like just the townies.
Yeah,
They just,
so a
like,
lot
they
of
just live
people
here
feel
their
as
whole
if,
life, you know?
yeah, there's almost a way in which people feel universities are parasites on towns. But then it's also a Stockholm syndrome because those universities bring all sorts of economic activity. So there is a kind of tiered feeling where towns need universities to economically survive, but then you're kept out.
It's the basis for resentment.
Yeah, it's a basis for resentment. But what if instead universities were actually just the meeting grounds of the entire community that is using the internet to deal with introduction problems precisely to make the network effects on those universities very effective?
I don't want to say, like, I feel like it's absolutely possible, and I think about when we were at Unoya, you know?
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like this community center we were part of for a long time, helped run in Charlottesville. Like, if there's something about a place like that where it's like open door, there's a lot of foot traffic, but you know, there'd be people who quote unquote were townies, there'd be older people, there'd be students, and I was like, it was really neat because when you were there, you were all just people. Like, you were just all people who were there to, you know, whatever it was, to go to the open mic or have the meal beforehand, or somebody's learning guitar, and like it really helped with you not thinking about that divide, you know? Not that like you ever meant to, but it's like you can create spaces where those things fall away and you really are just people, right? And like you're there because of like some maybe common interest, or you have creativity as a shared thing, or learning guitar as a shared thing, or wanting to have conversation. So yeah, I think it's definitely possible. And I think too, something I brought up in Parallax when we were talking about the introduction problem is, I do think that this acceleration thing, like we were saying, in a way, doing introduction courses was a way, because Thomas Jochen who brought up how there was like the way that they used to teach choir, they came up with the scale, right, like do re mi fa sol la ti. They came up with that to teach people faster, and like it took people from going from a year to learn their choir songs or whatever to like a couple months, you know. So anyways, the point of the matter, what I'm saying about this is like these systems of introduction, right, or like let's do these sort of basic things were themselves supposed to be acceleratory, right, or you know. But what happened was now we've kind of moved through that. Like that was a necessary time, like we needed that, I think. But now, because we have certain media technologies, you can do that even before. You can do that before the before, if that makes sense. So now it's even an opportunity for more acceleration. And not just for the sake of like, you know, sort of like Nicklandian like acceleration, but for the sake of like of actually having...
Well, you're accelerating to the network effect.
Yeah, you're accelerating to the network effect. You're accelerating for like more lively conversations in class. And you can have the expert there too, though. Like that's the cool thing. They get to demonstrate what they're good about because they can participate and hold conversation. I think that's actually should be what an expert can do. So...
Well, you can easily imagine a university system being it's a membership model. You know, if it's $20 a month, and then you can have access to the events going on. Yes,
$20 or $10K a month.
Or what? Well, right, whatever. Like whatever you said. Like anyone in the community. Like
Daniel, let's
you know, let's like up at 20. Let's come on now. Like you can easily imagine instead of this like this horrific. Well, it is basically horrible. Applications, and you take all these tests, and then you get into the college. And it's incredibly elite, right?
SATs?
SATs, yeah.
I
basically,
thought you were making fun of them by saying
SATs. Yes, he was. It was a slip. It's actually what it was. Like, so it's a membership model, but also too, like, if you're a member of this and you're gonna go and like engage, you don't want to show up and be the idiot who doesn't know the text. So there's there's a drive in it being so oral based and so interactive to actually come prepared for the topic. Yeah, like also too, you're gonna bring something to the table, like when you can.
And it also filters for like wasting time, because like. If I can get by in there without reading the thing, I'm good.
Yes.
Like, I'm still competent enough to contribute, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And so I don't need to waste time reading if I don't want to read, and I can still contribute.
Yeah, the metric is contributing to the network effect.
It's not whether I have read it or not.
No, it's contributing, not passing the test. Like, right now, it's like, the reason I'm here is to get the grades. Well, we're talking about a university where the reason you're there is to contribute to the network effect, which then becomes basically a creative, innovative hub of social imagination and who knows what else. Well, now we're addressing maybe that Robert Soul residual, which is this huge percentage of society that we can't explain by our current metrics. You need to create intentional environments of those possibilities. And those seem to be the possibilities of network effects, which are intentional environments. But what always holds network effects back from realizing their fullness are introduction problems. It is always the introduction problem that weakens nodes in the network from creating the effects.
So this goes back to our conversation yesterday of understanding otherness, right?
Yes.
And and what I find interesting is I sort of always intuitively, wrongly assume perfect information on all sides. Right? Just because it's so available and easy to get information. So I would sort of think intuitively that like, hey, like network effects are a natural thing. There's always already happening. There's no alpha in thinking about them. But in a sense, like there's this huge gap that is yet to be overcome in many different contexts, where one introducing one person to the other, finding all the possible connections which could be productive, finding the right ways to interact with people, are basically where value is created.
100%.
And this is also why social media is incredibly interesting, because it's trying to make those connections in interesting ways. So it's not about rote memorization, etc., but it's like about making the specific connections between people and especially so in a world of infinite information, you need to update yourself on the specific particular set of information which will give you the most value, which will benefit you the most. And that is the problem of networks and the problem of introductions and meetings.
And in my opinion, the severity of the introduction problem in hindering the possibility of network effects is not appreciated. And basically, the liminal web and the internet
because we don't know what we're missing, right? It feels like everything is already here, but so much more could be done. And like once something happens, it's like, oh yeah, this was obvious. But it's only obvious in retrospect.
Yes, that's correct. And so basically, if the liminal web has the function of dealing with the introduction problem, then these live spaces or whatever can actually be facilitating network effects that otherwise would not be possible. Like we really don't, because we have not, like this, like you're saying with the social media has been ways to like figure out the coordination of information to create networks, right? Well, I do think that the combination of Zoom, YouTube, video technology creates even stronger signals to determine to deal with the introduction problems. Like social media is better than nothing, but the YouTube portfolio that we've talked about is an even better signal model. And the other, because there's other parts of it. So for example, when I meet Cadell, this is a Hegel scholar. He knows things about Lacan. I get a sense of who this person is, right? Well, imagine without video recording technology, he would actually have to give his lectures one by one to every single individual so that they all can be introduced to that version of Cadell, right? Or to students in a classroom. So this is why professors would repeat the same lecture every single year, because you're in a sense reintroducing yourself. And you have to do it linearly, one by one. But now you can do a single recording and 100 people can see that, have a sense, and then when they come together, the network effect.
It's ridiculous that professors are still actually giving the same lecture. Now that you say this, it's like, what?
Well, but like it's true. Talking about this is like, wow, the model can change in a really drastically wonderful way. And it's not that, like, I don't mean to say this because I get it, like infrastructure stuff and whatever, it's difficult, but it's like, yeah, you could just record your stuff online, send it out, people move through it at their own pace, and you gather together for this like ability to have like more fruitful and more rich and more, like just this the diverse thought that can come out of that is really crazy. Now, some people might be like, well, that's all all like nice and stuff, but like what about for like CAD classes or something like that?
Well, you have your you have your live membership to do experiments. Like a reason why colleges can have a role is because they have literal laboratories. Like you need places that have these concentration of science and experiments and hands-on.
Like software, like certain software that they may have.
Yeah, that's one of the. But honestly, one of the reasons colleges are kind of pathological is because secretly the professors don't want to teach; they just want to do research. They want to have access to the equipment. Well, basically, we just own that. We'll be like, yeah, we're
problem solved. The internet solved it for you. Like,
you found yourself.
Yeah.
You never have to come to
Yeah, I mean, basically, colleges can be centers of research and networks. Like networks and research,
there really should be. Like, why aren't we using that more? Like the
bureaucracy,
you can film yourself, and then you don't have to do
people.
People are using it in that way. Like,
yeah. Well,
business people will just like straight up go to a fancy college just to network with the right people.
Yeah, and that's very true. What I would say, in my opinion, is there was a big rush, like a burst of an idea of online education between like 2011 and 2014, where a lot of universities tried to do it. UVA tried to do it, Harvard and stuff like that, and it was miserable. It was a failed experience, and it wasn't very good. The issue is that Zoom has changed everything, and the reason why it's changed everything is because, like, think about Goodell's lectures. They're not merely recording a professor in a classroom, like showing these like it literally is using PowerPoint, and it's a very different presentation, okay? That was not available when a lot of the Ivy Leagues and colleges were considering online. So they just saw this sucks, and they just like, this is not the future. And like UVA basically scrapped its efforts for online learning. The problem is they haven't retried going, wait a minute, Zoom actually changes everything. And Zoom does. The combination of Zoom plus YouTube, recording videos, a greater availability of faster internet for people, therefore you can have live conversation. Back in 2011, most people tuning in for the physics class at UVA, the internet is slow, but they can watch the video, and the professor, it's pre-recorded. He's not there live. Right? Now Zoom allows the person to be there live to give the presentation, or it's recorded and then they do a discussion later. That change infrastructurally means online education is now truly possible. But the universities tried it in the early 2010s, failed, and so they're like, well, there's no reason to invest further in that. So then they've just invested more in buildings. And I think that's been a strategical mistake, honestly. But it is of note that the reason why universities are not doing it is because in a funny way they tried too early. They tried when the infrastructure was not there, failed, and so they think they have tried it. And it didn't work. But actually, no, they tried it without the Zoom technology. So, that's why it didn't work.
But didn't they have to, they had to retry it hardcore in 2020, and, then that Zoom was more...
It was a disaster. Because they didn't have professors who were trained to use it like a Cadell. It became basically recorded lectures, not liminal web conversations. You can't, one of the keys, and we talk about with creative writing, you can't take a way of teaching for one information technology and copy and paste it into another and it worked just as effectively, right? You can't take the classroom structure that is basically made for printed text and just record it online. You have to change the way you talk and think, right?
But just to give, just for a second, not to push back on that too much, but what if they just did? They just recorded the stuff.
So let me jump.
It's you have that, but then you have...
You know what happened?
It's like a combination of the old school...
That's right. Well, guess what? That's just competitive then. Because you're like, okay, I've got this random guy at UVA teaching Hegel. Why not just listen to Holgate? It's just competitive then. Everyone's
it's just
yeah, there's gonna be a guy giving the lecture. It's just gonna be the best in the world and no one else.
Kids learn from Khan Academy.
Yeah.
Right? It's they're the best at explaining things, therefore all the university professors online are obsoleted.
Yeah, that's what ends up happening.
It's kind of easy to lose a job that way.
Yeah, that's right. So the reason why that model where there's a way in which you're saying, that you're right, there's going to be some classical lectures. It's just going to be a very, very small percentage of people who are the best in the world. And that's going to be 7. There's going to be seven Hegel professors, or some unsexy number, just some random number. It's going to be 13. There's going to be 13 major Hegel scholars who are really good, and all the hundreds of the rest go away.
It's ugly, disgusting meritocracy and harsh reality of it.
Yeah, but basically here's the trick. The meristocracy with the lecture-based structure is incredibly extreme, right? But it's actually good, because that meritocracy is then in service of solving the introduction problem so you can do the network effects. And the network effects don't have to have the same ruthless meritocracy, because because those people can take those classes and join the network effect. There's still going to be an elitism, but it's not... There's different kinds of meritocracy. There's the meritocracy that's the elimination. Meaning, okay, these are the 14th best Hegel and everyone else, no one's paying attention to you, you're out. But then there's the meritocracy of, to come behind this door, you have to have a certain capacity. That's kind of different in a way from the meritocracy that's kind of the cutting, like laser cut, right? Like, no one's saying you can't come across this door or that we don't need you. It's just that there's a certain standard you have to meet. And this is, I think, an important distinction of meritocracy. There's the meritocracy of saying, oh, we don't need you because we've got enough Hegel scholars, so therefore you've saturated the market. And then there's the meritocracy that says you have to meet a standard. Like, network effects, it's hard to imagine them being saturated. Like, what would it mean for a network effect to be saturated? Right? You know what I'm saying? Like, I guess it's possible, but maybe possible in regard to solving a given project. But really, like, a saturation in the market, it seems more difficult to think. But that means the meritocracy is not a matter of like, boom, we're saturated, you're cut out because you're not contributing to that. It's meeting a standard. But that is in a way a more, if it makes sense, a more democrat, in a sense, it's a more democratic meritocracy than the meritocracy of we've got our 14 Hegel scholars, we're done. And actually, that ruthless meritocracy that just boils the world down to the 14 Hegel scholars that know what they're doing is in service of dealing for the introduction problem to help with the more democratic meritocracy, right? And who wants a democracy where people don't have quality? You know, like, you actually want a meritocracy. You know, if you have a democracy of people that don't add value, that doesn't sound good. So you actually want this weird combination of meritocracy and democracy, which doesn't make sense by definition. But that's actually would be kind of the goal. Like, if you could make the reason why a meritocratic democracy would be the goal, because it would be the ultimate network effect. That's the key. Like, if you had the more people that were involved of higher quality, the greater the network effect, right? It's just really hard to get quality people.
Quality is the
key variable, right? So how do you increase the probability of more, even though of higher quality at higher numbers, even though it's not possible? Well, the key question is the introduction problem. By reducing the introduction problem. And that's what the liminal web could do. That could help with the real space, with the kind of the real location, like the real college or different things like that.
Just really quick on all of that. I was thinking though that some people, and I can understand where they're coming from. Like, if they've not experienced what a network effect is, they're like, there's very little
context, very little reference point.
Well, it's just like, what are we talking about? Like, why would we want to rush along and kind of automatize in the sense that you don't have to do repeat lectures constantly. You just hit the replay button on the thing they recorded, you know. But they're like, why are we skipping? Like, why do we want to accelerate that? Like, why do we want to? You see, because like, why are we trying to get to the network effect? What is that? What is that even
somebody
doing?
will do it better than you. Like, you don't have to. Don't do it. It's fine. Like,
yes, like, that's fine.
So you're saying, like, for the person who doesn't get it, like, that's fine. They don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, if they don't want to,
they'll be pressured into it at some point.
Mm-hmm.
They can hope to die before that if they want to, or they can evolve. I mean, like, welcome to Darwinism.
Well, but that's the issue. It's like, there is a certain cruelty in a way. There almost has to be. Like, what if it was like, I don't get this whole capitalism thing. Why are you people, like, going and joining markets? You know, there was an age where capitalism was unintelligible to people, right?
Fine, stay on the farm. But
fine.
Hear all the benefits of capitalism.
Yeah, that's
if you don't
basically
want it,
fine.
There's your farm. There's your woods.
But this is almost the tactile knowledge problem. You know, Jurij was mentioning Planier with the tactile knowledge stuff. It's the same, like, they're simply like, fine, you don't have to do the network effect, but the network effect is kind of the test. Like, that's the concrete test of, like, look what happens. See what comes out of it. See the innovation, the creativity.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the, like, the funny thing is network effects create, like, let's say you don't care about money. Let's say you don't care about anything. Mm-hmm. Network effects tend to have better friendships. Like, they have more engaging conversations. Like, so let's say you're like, I hate capitalism. I hate business. They're all evil. I just want relationships. I just want people. I want social value. Well, then you need to do what we're talking about, because network effects create stronger bonds. Yeah. Like it actually is remarkable, like, the depth of the friendship you see between, like, Samuel Johnson and Hannah More, or Keynes and Virginia Woolf. Like, in these networks, like, the kind of friendship they have is really freaking deep. Mm-hmm. So that's another thing. Like, when we're talking about network effects, I think there's really strong evidence to see that it's actually, like, critical for social evolution. But let's say you don't care about that. There's really good evidence to show that network effects actually create deeper relationships. Yeah. Like, deeper, more meaningful, better conversation. It's a really great way to not be bored. So, that's a value there.
I mean, I'm here because of it. and consider how actually a little amount of time we've spent together online. Like, it's not a lot. It's like... We had some exposure, like, indirectly or through events, but we didn't have a lot of, like, one-on-one conversations. You and I had some conversations, but that's it. And now I'm here, and, like, we feel like we've known each other for a long time, right?
Yeah, no, for real. It's really, I mean...
It's so natural, like, weirdly natural. Unnaturally natural, right?
Well, that's the thing, like, I, for me, like, experiencing the network effect is powerful. It's so, so cool. But for some people, they have not had that experience, unfortunately, for whatever reason, But it's like, there is something really powerful about it. It is happening. And, I guess if you don't think it's a thing, well, the train's kind of moving. Yeah, the train's
left.
You can get on the train or not.
Well, it's not left, but it's moving.
It's moving.
It will never leave forever.
Sure.
Like,
it's a really long train.
It's an infinite.
You gotta be a hobo. You got to be able to jump on trains.
Like those idiots who jump on trains, like, you just gotta hold on for your life.
Jump, Timmy. Jump, Timmy. Go. Yeah, so everyone, be a hobo. That's the name of the talk. Be the hobo. Do it, Timmy.
Be the intellectual hobo.
Be the
intellectually homeless.
Just do it. Well, the issue is, so basically... this way to just quickly, a lot of people like the internet destroys relationships. This is an example of how the internet makes possible qualities of relationships that are stupidly hard to get. It just depends on how you use it, right? If you use the internet for network effects, well, then that's like friendship. That's like right now we have a crisis of friendship and relationship. Well, this is using the internet for it because it deals with the introduction problem. The introduction problem is the greatest hindrance to intimacy, to deeper relationships, to friendship, because it takes forever to get over the introduction problem. But YouTube and videos and conversations allows you to get up to speed with someone really efficiently and quickly, so you can go quickly to the networking effect and it feels like you've known them forever. That technology has not existed until now. The introduction problem has been a constant hindrance on social development forever. And now we finally have a tool and technology that helps us address it in far more effective ways. But what were you going to say, Michelle?
Well, that's all really good. Two things. I think it's also really sweet as well because, there's like this acceleration of the introduction, but it's still like, just because you kind of get to a deeper, depth of relationship very quickly, you still have those slow, sweet moments of just hearing about a little bit more about somebody's childhood, or little stories about this, that, or the other, like all the things that come along with the kind of the slow progression of introduction. A friendship still is afforded to you. Like, it's not mutually exclusive, Does this make sense?
Of course, but actually a lot of people use their biography as kind of like the awkwardness of the introduction as opposed to the coloring of the story that is developing. Like, it's more natural now. Like, a lot of people, like you see in like dating, like how are dating apps often? It's like, let me tell you my story and my background, and it feels very listy. It feels very, let me share information for you. When you deal with the introduction problem more effectively, well, then the coming of those biographical information feels part of the story. It doesn't feel poured in from the top. It feels natural. It feels like you're not trying to tell them who you are. You're helping, you're sharing them into
My
your
favorite ice
story.
cream is-
Yeah, right. Like what happens is most people have used biographical information to deal with the introduction problem. That's how they've dealt with it. This is where I was born. This is what I like to do. These are my preferences. Now, because you have a technology to deal with the introduction story, the biographical can feel like it unfolds naturally with the story. It unfolds naturally in the right time. It's not something you list out so they can decide if they want to, buy your product or whatever, or date you. It becomes just a naturally unfolding of the story of the relationship.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I'm just thinking about like the skeptic who's kind of just like like obviously we understand the introduction problem from an education point. I think there's
Introductions, everyone hates icebreakers. Like introductions are always a problem to people. They're awkward. Like even people say they love if you love introducing yourself, you might be an egotist. There's a certain like I want people to know me. Well, that could be a problem, right? But then there's also so introductions have always been a problem.
I don't know. Yeah.
You're sleeping in the garage, Dan. Okay.
Get on that train, hobo.
Okay, I'll get on the train. There's some tracks over on Eastbrook. It's fine.
They say let him sleep in the doghouse. No,
get on the train, hobo. Okay, I'll ride it out.
But like I always loved meeting new people. I still do. I mean, even if it was very superficial, like I wasn't, really deeply like I didn't know about the network.
But you had to repeat the introduction time and time again, right? Like you had to, but you could have enjoyed it. But there's a problem in terms of efficiency.
I mean, but I will be honest. I mean, that's you can see things with like rose-colored glasses to look at that.
Sure.
If I think back about it, yeah, it was like fun and in the moment, because look, a lot of times I was meeting people with my identical twin sister,
sure.
and people were like, wow, you're twins, and you get all of the like sort of
they gave you an in for the introduction.
Yeah, and I think there was a lot of like, it was just fun, It was fun. It wasn't anything, I didn't think of it as a problem. I didn't think of it as anything like that. But I will say that in terms of like some longevity or the depth of those relationships, no, it was a little bit more, I would almost say it was just enjoying, it's almost like you enjoy a show. Like, it's just sort of a little more performative, it's just sort of fun and exciting, but it's not something that necessarily lasts long, that you feel like you've known the people forever. It's not like that, really.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe, kind of, but...
A really fun thing is giving people different snippets of your life. But when you meet one person, you give them one snippet. When you meet another person, you give them another snippet, right? Because you cannot give them everything.
Yeah.
And so conversations will naturally tend to yourself introducing yourself in one way, then another way, then a third way.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a nice organic part about it.
Yeah.
But, and it feels almost soulless to make it as efficient as possible. And yet sort of like, here we are.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, I think these can coexist. I think that the beauty of the fact that you can have some sort of thing that is more efficient in terms of introduction, it does allow you to have really incredible opportunities like this, like to have you here, like to have people, to be able to get to know people in such a way where you can, you can converse and you can feel a type of closeness. I don't know, it's hard to describe, but it's like that feeling of knowing them for much longer, or something like that. And I think people can maybe try to find this by like going drinking together or something.
Sure.
Maybe if people try to find this in other ways, but it's a way. It is an avenue we have afforded to us that I think can be very fruitful and beautiful. But it can also coexist with like just the random people you're meeting.
Sure. Well, there's a few things. So first off, most organizations in history have actually needed people like you and your sister who were good with introduction to actually get the organization to meet people, because other people would not. Like you had people that had different roles. Like the extroverts tended to play. For an
introvert, it's probably a nightmare. Like seeing
so organizations, precisely because of the marketing and introduction problems, needed people who enjoyed the introduction. But the problem is there's a certain shallowness that helps it makes it difficult to have the distance and growth turn into depths and roots, right? So that's always a transition problem that you have to deal with, right? Also, critically, one of the reasons why the liminal web helps with the introduction problem in an effective way is precisely because you don't realize you're dealing with the introduction problem when you're on the liminal web. When you're forming, you're not thinking about that. You're creating a portfolio. It's not like you're saying, I'm going to deal with introductions, right? You're making content, but you deal with the introduction problem secondarily without thinking about it by creating a portfolio that people can see and have a sense of who you are without ever having met you. And critically, here's the critical part, you cannot get network effects unless you basically have deep understandings of the people there. Like the effectiveness of the network effect is contingent on the depth of knowledge of the people there. Well, that's a huge problem because and also too, if people are seeing similar YouTube videos, then the introduction that you have of people are similar. Like you're talking about, like you give a different understanding of each person. Well, in order to have an effective network effect, you want people to have it doesn't have to be exactly the same, but a general similar sense of the depths of who you are, right? And that's where you can do quick information exchange because you know where the person is at, right? What the liminal web allows is an introduction problem that is not merely the problem of introducing yourself, but it's the problem of having deep understandings of lots of people without going through the extended processing period of getting that depth one by one, which takes a really long time. Like now you can basically get a deep introduction understanding of a Matt Siegel, a Cadell, a Jurij, like different people, and then when they meet, when they're all in the same room, everyone is already deeply introduced to everyone else. That's another key factor. Like for a network effect to really work, the 5 people in the room have to already have a deep understanding of the other 5 people in that room, right? And that's what the liminal web makes possible versus one by one. Okay, I'm going to give a lecture, then you all listen, then you give a lecture, and this may take 3 days, and then we can start the network effect after 3 days. That can work. There have been plenty of retreats. There are still many basically, the academic conference is precisely that. Yeah. Like, okay, we've got like 20 people here, but each one will give a conference, but it's ineffective. And it's not a effective way to do things.
Good event organizers know that it's not about the lecture or the main thing which is happening. The main thing is just an excuse to draw similar type of people into the same room.
Yes. Yeah. So why not just own that? And be like, hey, we're doing
watch it online and then come here.
Yes, that's basically right.
So we don't have to waste time.
Yeah, basically. Like, why not?
No. I mean, I think it's a fair point, and I do think I was going to say one of the other points from before is when I was talking about the person who's like, what network effect, why, and what value does this bring? It makes me think of this thing that Andrew Luber shared with me one time, which was about it was just this little video, but I thought it was pretty insightful. Because this man was talking about how a lot of times the people we see as geniuses actually were part of a scene. Like
very important.
They're part of a scene. Like you're talking about with Einstein, right? He said the most formative thing for him was his philosophy reading group he did for 30 years, right? So,
right.
So what he was doing that, he wasn't doing that by himself. He was doing it with other people who sat and talked with him.
Yep.
So, and same with Picasso, same with most of the people who we get as the person. There were other people all around them who were influencing.
There's always network effect.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. That is that is what comes out of network effects.
Yes.
Is actually the genius, but it really is more like a genius. That was like this word play, a genius, which I thought was pretty nice. And I think too, it shows how, because we get this bent on the genius, and this like individual person, and like this idea of they must have been the arbiter of truth. We forget the network effect that created that genius in the first place, or contributed to that genius in the first place, which is why I think this model of how things have been done educationally have been in this sort of it's not as networky, right? It's just about get the genius from here to there, right? Instead of realizing the genius was birthed out of the network, it was birthed out of the scene. So that we must make space for, we really need to cultivate that just as much. But a lot of times, unfortunately, it's so bent on the understandable virtue of, passing down the truth, that then you start to actually talk about what the truth means, or why it even is truth, or why it's even resonant as truth. And people are like, we can't talk about that. Oh, why not? Well, because it's just not part of the curriculum. That's what I would feel like in my discussion sections after the lectures. That would happen a lot, where you try to actually talk about something, like do the whole network thing, and it just kind of gets shut down. I'm not saying that always happens. You hopefully have a different experience with that in discussion segments or sections of your lectures, but it does happen. I never, to be honest, I really
Where does it happen?
I'm just talking about in my own university experience. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was great. I learned many things, but I did not actually experience the network effect in the places where you were kind of supposed to. Like, so you have a lecture, then you have these smaller discussion groups, right? That's where the network effect might be able to happen, right?
Sure.
Like, we got the information, now we can do the whole networking thing, like the network.
Yeah.
It didn't happen because I would try to bring up questions that, to me, were like, let's talk about why the truth we just got passed down actually resonates with our lives and like our actual like lived relationships, and the conversation would be sort of shut down by the like leader of this discussion. And I'm not saying it's always that way. I'm just saying it happened a lot. It didn't. There were occasions where it didn't happen, and those were like the most fruitful classes for me, you know. But I don't know that I really experienced the network effect in its fullness until out of college, which is weird. Like, shouldn't it be able to happen there? Like, that's the whole point. That's part of the point, right? You get the truth, and then you talk. You have this discussion. Maybe the thought is like, well, why would we need to discuss what the truth is anymore?
You don't even get
like,
to talk about the truth.
Yeah,
Even
yeah.
if you give the truth, you cannot talk about it.
Speak about the truth. Virtual Fight Club.
It's secret truth.
Yeah. Well, there's a few things. You know, first, it's very important, based on Randall Collins' work on the sociological theory of intellectual change. Like, we get the impression, the Bloomsbury group is where all the all-stars gathered. No, what the Bloomsbury group was where some competent people gathered, and because they joined that network, they became all-stars. That's the key. Like, it's like you have competent, impressive people that network, and then they become Wittgenstein. You know, then Bertrand Russell. Like, but the network is like the secret sauce, right? And yeah, like there's a lot of people that always say my best education happened outside the classroom. Okay, let's think about that long and hard. Like, everyone says that. That is such a common notion. Well, okay, so then what?
But they couldn't have had outside the classroom if they didn't have.
So basically, today the liminal web makes it possible to have the classroom outside the college. Like, that's
So you're saying combining those?
No, the classroom's outside the college. Like, you do it on your own time in your own lecture, and then when you go to the university, rather than waste time with having classes on the college campus, it's just pure network effect. Like with the event, like because basically the problem has been how do we give people reason to come onto the college campus to have the network effect? Well, we'll do classes. We'll have a presentation at an event so people have a reason to be there. But that's not really what matters. It's just bringing people together, right?
So the university is just events now.
Yeah, that's correct. You just basically focus on events and also live exchanges that can't... Like, so for example, rather than giving a lecture at the university, you're hosting basically a cipher or an intellectual conversation, which in order to have, you'd have to be there. Or to have live, rather than going, for example, to see a concert about music, you go to participate in a jazz improvisation, which you could only do by being there, right? Like, you need what the universe, like the design question, the new architectural horizon here, which I don't have answers for all of these possibilities, would be like, how do we think of new live events that you have to be here to fully experience, but are now possible because the liminal web exists dealing with the introduction problem? You understand what I'm saying? So the introduction problem has been dealt with the liminal web, which there would be reason to think opens possibility of live events that were never possible before because you had to spend so much time on the introduction problem. So what might those be, and what might we be able to facilitate that otherwise was not possible?
I don't mean to jump in. I'm just thinking about this, like, even for sciences, because when I went into university, I was like, I want to become a virologist. You know, I was really interested in like biology, virology, but I really wanted to understand virology at like the chemical level. But I had to take all these introduction courses.
Yeah.
Like I had to take just basic chemistry, biology, genetics, and I honestly, the way the structure was for these classes. Huge lecture class, 300 people, and then you have like 4 multiple choice tests for the whole year. This is your grade, like this is it. And each test had maybe 5 questions, literally 5 questions. So you get 1 or 2 wrong, like your grade is really bad. Like you're not doing, your grade's not very good. Long story short, I'm trying to think about this for the sciences too, because I feel like you'd get so many. I think you'd get more people.
Yes,
who actually,
in healthcare,
in
science, absolutely.
And who actually still stay passionate about the thing they're passionate about. If you weren't having to like subject them to.
It's idiotic.
Some of these introduction classes, which is like, I really like.
It's idiotic.
The chemistry class I took. No offense.
It's stupid.
Well,
It's a waste of time. What they do to the...
It's not stupid, but it did not relate to my questions.
Yeah,
You know, and like, if you could actually have a class that was like, and I understand they can't cater to like, you know, all of the hundreds of thousands, you know, whatever, hundreds of thousands, I guess, at some universities.
ChatGPT can.
What I mean to say is like, you know, you could actually have the network effect and like these kind of cool liminal, you know, event moments, even in science, where you have people
100%.
come and they ask questions about what they're burning about, like what they're passionate about, versus people, because I would hear people ask questions. You know what they're asking questions about? They're asking questions in a desperation to make sure they get a good grade on their test. Like they're really scared that they don't know the information because they know it's going to be tested on. Like people would come to these small gatherings with the professor or the TA just to make sure that they were like, okay, do I know this? Do I know this? Do I know this for the test? And I get the sentiment because you're so concerned about like your GPA like just tanking. And maybe you should just not care about grades and then just keep going.
Well, you're not going to be hired. You're not going to get the job.
Like, fail all the like intro classes, and then you just finally you get to your microbiology or your chem bio class you were actually wanting to get to. But what I mean to say is like it does feel weird because I'll be honest, and maybe this is not saying very good things about me, but because of that experience, I didn't continue with the sciences. I didn't because I was like I'm not even getting to the questions I have. Right, and this was a time when internet was still pretty early. Like I guess it was there, but I didn't really think about it as a tool like you did. Like let me read while I'm in class, So it's like I don't know. It's fascinating to me to think like if you could really jump into the things you want to, not because you invalidate all the stuff as like oh that's too basic, but really just because it's like why would I be studying this over here? I took a really high level chemistry already in high school. I took like the top chemistry I could take. I'm basically relearning that at a college level with a stupid test structure that makes my grade really low. So now, and then I have to take like maybe 4 more of those before I even get to ask my question about virology and the chemical level of viruses and their protein delivery structure. Why am I having to do this? Like,
it's obviously retarded, yeah.
Yeah, it's retarded. It's stupid. It's really stupid.
That's the answer.
That is stupid. It is completely idiotic, and you have gotten there are no healthcare workers. You have a lack of scientists. They were like, why is there so much scientific illiteracy? Well, John, you've made it retarded.
Because you filter it for retards who will pass the test.
Like,
who will waste their time
like
learning all this shit.
And then they're like, why do people hate scientists? Because you were the guys who did it for the tests, and you just gamified it, so we hate you.
You're the not cool guys, literally. All the scientists are the people who are not cool.
You just gamified the test. Yeah. So screw you. And you're going to run the country? No. So, no, it is completely idiotic. It is so retarded.
I'm just like going on and like, well, it's clearly retarded.
It's just, it's retarded. It's the most idiotic thing. This structure of the...
Thinking back to it now, I'm like, that's so crazy. Because now it's like, you could do it so differently. You could do it so differently. And it could be amazing.
But this is an example where education structure has massive practical consequences.
And the thing is, like, each of those college classes is a lot of money. Like, you don't always think about it.
Yeah, it's a ton of money. And we don't have healthcare workers.
And it's like, it's a ton of money.
What has happened? What has grown like crazy in healthcare? The bureaucracy. Because the classes to do the hospital bureaucracy sure is easier than the ones to be an actual doctor, and there's more money. Yeah. Per hour, there's definitely more money.
Yeah, and you're getting a lot more of like just how people do health stuff today is like, you're getting a lot more PAs, you're getting a lot more people using like just the minute clinics or things like this. Like they're maybe not having like they're just using teledoc, And obviously, yes, it's still going to go to a doctor, and the doctor has been through like that huge, long, multi-years thing that they do. But it's like, guys, we maybe want to think about this thing we keep doing because is it working?
No.
Is it working? Are you allowing people to actually like go after their passion to like actually help people, heal people?
It's a meaningless filtration system, and it's all tied.
Like, yes, this is it.
Because because they're bitter. It's because they did it. They're bitter. It's like when you'd go a hard road. Like we had to learn all this stuff. You will too. Like there's a certain like bitterness. There really is, and like also it's a risk to do things differently, right? And but there's the point is. Education models have massive practical consequences because that structure of doing sciences has led to a lack of healthcare workers. It has led to science illiteracy.
Yeah.
It has led to also scientists who aren't very good entrepreneurs usually because they're really good, so they're not experimental. Like there's been a growing gap between science and experimentation. You know, these days there's been real freaking practical consequences. So it really matters. Like, and I can absolutely envision this dialect, if you will, this relationship between the liminal and the college campuses as being massively beneficial to sciences, right? Because you could learn this material without having to take a stupid freaking test. The test would be, if there was test, and actually what we're basically saying is there wouldn't be. There would be the test would be the results of the network effect. The proof is in the result of the network effect.
They're just necessary for high stakes scenarios.
Yes.
Right? Like for doctors who need to know certain things to not kill their patients, to help them survive.
Yes.
For people who are doing hard stuff which has bad potential consequences.
Yes, and there's also a difference between taking a test to see if you can meet the high stake position, potential to say, hey, okay, we know we need to work on this skill to get better practical results versus, you failed, can't be a doctor. Like, there's a difference between testing to, get better at the skill and testing to allow you to even be in the arena of learning the skill. Like, that's also a big difference.
A lot of the tests are abstractions from the reality. Like, if you have a test of, hey, could you use this defibrillator? That's important. We want to make sure they know how to use the defibrillator. Like, all of those things.
But what's the difference between apprenticeship and a test?
But that's the thing, you can also do...
That's a good point.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah. Let me show you how to use this.
I'll show you, you show me. Let's see if you learned it,
So here's an interesting thing. If you look at occupations which are being increasingly decoupled from the university system, there are certain ones to which this is happening, and there are certain ones for which that is not happening, right? And so the obvious one where it is happening is coding and software engineering, where you will just not learn how to be an engineer to build good software in a university. It's just like a fact. You'll just the way to do it is just go out and do stuff on your own.
Yeah.
There's certain scientific research which you could go into, which might be better suited for university, but in general it's just better to go into the industry by yourself. And I think this will be happening with a lot of knowledge, right? But then the credentialing comes in, where certain types of knowledge will not be able to just go away from this college credentialing system, right? So being a doctor, being a lawyer, the places where the profession is tied to the institution and the institution gives it credibility, those are the tough nuts to crack.
Yeah.
And those will basically just be held by incredibly hardworking neurotics with no life and no coolness is what these occupations will filter for. So it's really interesting to see how it will play out, whether because you're seeing also alternative health experts who just write a statement, this is not medical advice, and then they go off and give medical advice, which is perfectly legitimate because they grow their reputation online as somebody who's knowledgeable. The person has all the exposure to them, and they can choose them whether they want them to help them heal whatever illness they have, and it's a good model. So I'm just hoping to see more of it.
I'm glad you bring that up, because I was thinking the same thing for the health world. It's there's a lot happening online with this decentralization, and I think it's a lot of people are more open, maybe whether they've had bad experience with hospital or maybe allopathic or not. Maybe they have fine experience with allopathic, maybe they've had life-saving experience with allopathic medicine. But just the fact that there's more diversity and more breadth of health approaches, and you see that now more today, like health coach or different perspective or different type of healing modalities. So I think it's just going to be interesting to see.
And there's even something like Private ER or some kind of organization in Switzerland, where they literally funded it as a sort of a public good, where they the company, I guess, was not government funded, but they self-organized, and then a bunch of people just sort of together decided to fund that thing, and now they're being taken care of by this non-governmental organization which just sort of popped up and happened to be there. So I think a big part of it is just like a skill issue where if the institution is not giving you the credibility, you just go and do it better.
Yes.
And like figure it out, right?
Yeah.
Like the laws are actually probably not preventing you as much as you think. It just like requires a lot of ingenuity to do things better. And like trying to fight against the credentialing system, the university system, rather than finding an alternative route and treating everything like a business in a sense to make it work, right?
Yes. Well,
That's a good point.
you know, for me, so on this idea, like if we think what would the liminal web, like brick and mortar colleges go together, like I what you would see is basically what would it mean if you had colleges that didn't do the introduction problem at all? Like it wasn't. Well, you could see them being like homing network effects where people have taken care of the introduction and they come to these communal centers. They would have experimental, like you do scientific experiment, high research equipment, like stuff like that would be centered, and then extremely specialized research and like doctors, lawyers, and PhDs, right? You think of those three things, and I just think that colleges actually could profoundly blossom if they weren't burdened by the introduction problem. Like they would like blossom. And so this, you know, in this way, I don't think the liminal web has to be like destroying college campuses. It doesn't have to be seen as a kind of like the replacement of college campuses. It could actually be freeing college campuses from the main thing that's always been holding it back, in my opinion, especially modern colleges, which is the introduction problem. Well, you deal with that, well, then you can then go into colleges basically immediately into network effects. You have a sense of like the people that are going to be there, where people are at in that, and we really don't know the possibilities of a society that gets good at network effects. Like we really don't know of what is possible with that. We know network effects are insanely powerful, but we don't know what is possible if we got good at them, per se. Because we've never really been able to be good at them because we've been burdened by the introduction problem. Well, now we have a way to get good at it, and who knows what's possible with that. And honestly, then, too, belonging and network effects are strongly tied. Like, you feel belonging in network effects. Like, I want to be here. Like, this is, you know, there's a belonging. It's like, yeah, something's happening. Belonging and something's happening here go together, right? And so network effects and belonging, again, are strongly together. And community and feeling like you have friends and like you're doing is something as meaningful is occurring, something is unfolding. This is belonging and network effect. This network effects and belonging, again, are strongly tied together. So if you can create the conditions where society gets good at network effects, then you also open the doors for those possibilities of belonging and dealing with the meaning crisis and relationships and communities, while simultaneously opening up possibilities and conditions of possibility we haven't been able to think before. But this is things that kind of open up when you think of the liminal web together with the brick and mortar. And also, too, I guess the last thing I would say is I just think also the heuristic and hermeneutics that arises with that is one that's creating the conditions to follow something and to see where it goes. Which the main point also, we were just from what we were saying in the kitchen, is if you read the biography of Hegel, if you read the biographies of these writers, and we're trying to get to the truth of Hegel, what you find in someone like Hegel is they're trying to get to the truth that they're following themselves. Like they don't, like, it's not really like when Hegel writes the phenomenology of spirit, he is following a thought in that process. And the truth is the process that arises. He doesn't have a completed vision that he's just recording from memory and matching the paper what's in his head. Like the truth of Hegel is the following of an unfolding, right? Yeah. And Hegel provides us unique tools for that unfolding. But basically a network effect based education would be honoring the intellectual and creative act that you see time and time in the biographies of these people, which is a pursuit of a certain call, a pursuit of an intuition you have, a pursuit of something. Yeah. So to emphasize getting to the truth of Hegel is a portrayal of the spirit of Hegel. But we simply have not had, per se, we have not had the technologies to pursue the spirit of Hegel because we've been burdened by the introduction problem. Well, now it's not. So, you know, we need to change a heuristic accordingly.
Yeah. That's exciting.
Yes.
All roads lead back to Hegel.
That's the moral of this whole talk.
Yeah,
We just want you to know the truth, guys.
Yeah, the truth is, it all comes back to that.
Well, thank you, guys.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Yuri.
Thank you guys.
So happy to have you
This was
here.
very fun.
Yes, it was. Yeah, so we have our little night light cubes in different things.
In the library.
In the library. So it's very good. Well, Yuri, it's so nice that you're here.
Yeah.
That
So
we
happy.
have the liminal web to overcome the interdiction problem, to see Yuri, and it's felt like, it's like you've known him for 20 years. So different things. It's
That's
an amazing
wonderful.
thing. So, and like I said, I do think it's an exciting time.
It is.
I
do
think
it's exciting.
I think there are technologies now that deal with problems that we have not been able to address to see the full potential of network effects. And so we'll see what happens.
Yes.
For more by OG Rose, visit ogrose.com, Twitter, Anchor, Instagram, and so on and so forth.
Channel your inner Hegel.
Yeah, channel your inner Hegel. And
He'll lead you to OG Rose, and OG Rose will
yeah,
lead you back
and
to
different
Hegel.
things like that, and see Yuri's fantastic presentation at the Lacan conference with Philosophy Portal,
Woo-hoo.
and his beautiful face as well in the video. So that all works out. And thank you so much for your
Thank you.
time.